following stories tell the tale of 3 celebrities who were killed in the most horrific ways. Stephanie Moseley was a stunning young woman who was born on January 1st, 1999 in British Columbia. She moved to Los Angeles in 2002 when she was just a teenager, eager to begin her dream of working in the entertainment industry. She was hardworking and determined. There was nothing she couldn't accomplish. She started out with smaller projects, but would soon make connections with real, accomplished stars. Her good looks were impossible to ignore, and she caught the eye of both Jennifer Lopez and Chris Brown, whom she would later begin working for. Stephanie worked as a backup dancer for Britney Spears and Janet Jackson. Throughout the course of her career, she would also work alongside some of the greatest people in the music industry, such as Beyonce, Jennifer Lopez, Chris Brown, Rihanna, and Usher. Stephanie would later make her way into acting, and was even selected by Jamie Foxx himself to play his wife in the television special Jamie Foxx Unpredictable. She scored smaller roles in movies like Twilight, Breaking Dawn Part 1, Mirror Mirror, and Sparkle. One of Stephanie's closest friends was the actress and model Eva Marcial, whom she had known since she was just a teenager. When Stephanie first came to Los Angeles, she didn't know very many people. Meanwhile, Eva had connections of her own. She decided to help guide Stephanie, and the pair decided to forge a special pact. They would support each other personally and professionally, no matter what, and would become stars together.
She had just moved to LA. She was a part of a dance group called Best Kept Secret, and my cousin was doing her makeup, and I just thought she was the most gorgeous girl, and she didn't have any friends in LA. And she just had the dancer world, so I decided I'd take her under my wings, and at that time I was headed to college, and I decided I wanted to be a mom.
Stephanie's biggest break would be when she was given a role on the VH1 drama series Hit the Floor. This film followed the lives of the Los Angeles Devil Girls, a fictional cheerleading squad. It appeared that Stephanie's career was just starting to take off, and that she had plenty of success to look forward to. Unfortunately, her life would come to a horrifying end during an altercation with her husband, up-and-coming rapper Earl Hayes. Hayes ran in the same circle as the infamous boxer Floyd Mayweather. Mayweather was the leader of a group that called themselves the Money Team. Mayweather and Earl were so close that Floyd even called Earl his best friend. Mayweather wasn't just friends with Earl, but Stephanie as well, and claimed to care about both of them deeply. Stephanie and Earl would hit it off, and would eventually get married in 2008. However, their marriage was not without difficulties, and the pair argued a lot. Things got even worse when there were reports that Stephanie had cheated on Earl with the American singer Trey Songz. Her alleged infidelity eventually led to her and Earl living apart for 2 years. However, they both seemed to have an interest in salvaging their marriage. Despite seeming to want to make things work, Stephanie had broken Earl's trust, and he would frequently rant to his friends about his wife's infidelity. One night in December of 2014, after Earl and Stephanie had been engaging in an argument, Earl called Floyd Mayweather. Mayweather spoke with him briefly through video chat before asking him to put Stephanie on the phone. After speaking to both of them, Mayweather had suspected that they had both been engaging in multiple forms of substance abuse. Stephanie passed the phone back to her husband. It was then that Mayweather noticed something horrific. Earl was pulling out a gun. Before Mayweather could tell him to stop or ask him what he was doing, he heard shots ring out. Nevertheless, some news outlets have claimed that there was more to the story. Some believe that Mayweather had urged Earl to leave his wife due to her infidelity, and that on that fateful night, the reason Earl had called Mayweather was to tell him that he decided to take his wife's life instead. It was rumored that Mayweather had tried to de-escalate the situation and begged Earl not to carry through with the plan, but that his pleas fell on deaf ears. No matter what led up to this tragic night, something is undeniably clear. Both Stephanie and Earl were found shot dead at their Los Angeles apartment. Police believe that Earl took his wife's life first before taking his own. Law enforcement arrived at the scene after neighbors called 911 and reported hearing many gunshots. Stephanie was found deceased in the bathroom, and Earl was found in the bathroom. Police also found an incredible amount of controlled substances within the couple's apartment. In fact, it is believed that their stash was worth around $40,000. It's not clear what, if any, role this substance had in the couple's ultimate demise. When Eva Marcial found out about this tragic news, she was heartbroken.
Everyone has their problems, but if you're asking if anyone knew that something would come to this, hell no. It was the last of what anybody would have thought. I thought it was a lie when I got the phone call.
While Eva was aware of her friend's relationship troubles, she had never realized how bad they truly were.
Our life hasn't necessarily been rosy as of late, but I don't think, I know that I didn't think it was gonna come to this.
Jennifer Lopez also spoke out about Stephanie's death.
I knew Stephanie pretty well. It was a devastating thing.
James LaRosa, executive producer of Hit the Floor, described what Stephanie meant to him.
She was just a huge light for us, a wonderful person.
The loss of Stephanie struck Chris Brown as well, as he took to social media to mourn her death. R.I.P. baby girl. Danced with me on tour and was always the coolest person, he wrote in a post. Months after Stephanie and Earl's death, rapper 50 Cent came for Mayweather on social media, claiming that he believed he knew more about what happened leading up to the tragedy than he let on. He pointed out that he had seen Mayweather appearing in good spirits at a Clippers game not long after the killings, and questioned how he could seem so unbothered after the loss of two of his friends. He even went so far as to suggest that maybe Stephanie and Mayweather had been having an affair, and that's what caused this whole tragedy to unfold. The accusations occurred after 50 Cent and Mayweather were already in the midst of an online feud due to some jokes the boxer had made regarding 50 Cent's parenting and personal life, among other things. While 50 Cent's claims have never been proven, there were some unsuspecting signs exhibited by Earl that seemed to foreshadow the tragic events that would unfold in 2014. He wrote a song in which he claimed to be describing killing someone before taking his own life. The lyrics in the line, "Take somebody with you that really didn't deserve it. Show everybody that life just ain't perfect. And when you get mad, it's time to close curtains. 'Cause this song ain't for you." Following Stephanie's death, she was praised by many people, including stars. Eva Marcial had nothing but good things to say. Stephanie was an absolute angel. She really was to everybody she's ever met. She's brought so many of these people into my life. She's connected so many people together. She's just loved. She will never, ever, ever, ever be forgotten, she said. Lana Clarkson was a stunning and talented American actress who rose to fame in the 1980s. She was born April 5th, 1962, to her parents, Donna and James. She grew up in Sonoma County, California, and had two siblings, her brother Jesse and her sister Fawn. After her father died in 1978, she and her family decided to resettle in Los Angeles, where she could finally pursue her lifelong dream career in the entertainment industry. It didn't take long for her to find a name for herself in Hollywood, even though her career started out pretty slow. The first film she was in was Fast Times at Ridgemont High. This was a 1982 coming-of-age comedy in which she played a small role. She then appeared in the famous 1983 film Scarface. She would then forge a professional relationship with producer Roger Corman, who would help her take her career to the next level. She would appear in 5 of his films. The first was Deathstalker in 1983, when she played a fierce female warrior. The next film she was in was Barbarian Queen in 1985. It was for this movie that she was perhaps most well known for. She played a sword-wielding warrior named Amathea. This film particularly appealed to the male audience and contained some pretty heavy scenes and adult content. Some people felt that the film was simply too graphic and relied heavily on explicit scenes. Nevertheless, it helped get Lana on the map. Despite the criticism of the first film, Lana would also go on to star in the sequel, The Barbarian Queen 2, The Empress Strikes Back. Other films that were important to Lana's career included The Haunting of Morella and Vice Girls, in which she took on a sultry reputation to catch a criminal. By the time Lana had reached her 30s, her acting career was beginning to slow down. She couldn't get the kind of roles she did when she was younger, and she knew she would have to take her career in a different different direction if she wanted to be able to still support herself. She was passionate about comedy and hopeful that she could make money that way. However, it would take time to make her way in the industry, and she would work part-time as a hostess at the House of Blues in Hollywood in order to pay her bills. What all Lana might have been able to accomplish during the second half of her life will never be known, because her life was cut tragically short on February 3rd, 2003. She was just 40 years old. The tragic tale of the end of her life began with a 911 phone call by Adriano De Souza, who was the driver for none other than record producer Phil Spector. Spector was one of the most popular and successful record producers of the 1960s and worked with famous stars like the Beatles, the Righteous Brothers, and Leonard Cohen. Despite his successful career, Spector would fall into substance use habits and would often seclude himself from the rest of the world. In Spector's last interview that was ever conducted regarding his career, he made it clear how highly he thought of himself, even comparing himself to that of a genius.
Just don't know what you're doing. That is so important, but you know it's different and you know it's important. And maybe that's what the word genius is. Maybe that's the genie in us, the gene in us. It's the step that makes you able to see above.
He also made very bizarre comments about the character Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse was the first black movie star.
He was a strange, creepy individual with violent tendencies, especially towards women. He got up, backhanded me with a pistol, and said,
"I told you to take your effing clothes off,"
said one woman who interacted with him in the past. On the night of her death, Lana was at Spector's mansion in Alhambra, California. At first, things appeared to be perfectly normal, and yet the night would take an incredibly disturbing turn. Lana's stunning body was found slumped over a chair. She'd been shot to death. The scene was made all the more gruesome by her teeth, which had been blown out of her mouth and scattered on the floor. When Spector's driver was on the phone with 911 dispatcher, Spector can be heard in the background saying, "I think I just killed someone," while De Souza told the police that he saw Spector holding the gun that allegedly took Lana's life, a .38 revolver. His fingerprints were not detected on the weapon. "My name is Adriano. I'm Phil Spector's driver. I think my boss killed somebody. Can you send an ambulance? We have a lady on the floor and a gun in his hand," he said. It soon became clear that the world was going to see a whole new side to Phil Spector. You start thinking, oh my, there's going to be a trial and we're going to find out things we didn't know, one reporter at the time said. He was soon arrested. Spector claimed that Lana had accidentally killed herself while playing around with the weapon, and that she even kissed it while pointing it towards herself. Police weren't so sure. Spector was freed after paying his $1 million bail. Despite the incident occurring in 2003, the trial against Spector didn't begin until 2007. While his defense argued that Lana's death had been a tragic accident, the prosecution team told a different story. They believed that on the night of Lana's death, Spector was drinking and may have been romantically interested in her. They claimed that he could have pointed the gun at her in an attempt to keep her from leaving in the case that she did not reciprocate his feelings. Because of a hung injury, there would be a mistrial. The next trial would not begin until the following year. Spector went through many different lawyers in an attempt to prove his innocence. But this time around, the jury would find him guilty in connection to Lana's death, and he was ultimately given 19 years to life in the California prison system. Despite multiple appeals, Spector would never find a way out of prison. He died in April of 2021 due to COVID-19 complications. He was 81 years old. Lana's tragic death inspired several different films, including The Agony and Ecstasy of Phil Spector. Helen Mirren and Al Pacino starred in the film. Today, it is believed that Spector's heavy substance use and possible head trauma could have caused him to make a poor decision that ultimately cost Lana her life. Lloyd Avery II rose to recognition for his role in the 1991 film Boys in the Hood. This was a coming-of-age film written and directed by John Singleton. It tells the story of a group of young men who are trying to navigate life in a rough area of Los Angeles. It featured stars like Ice Cube, Angela Bassett, and Cuba Gooding Jr. The movie was received well and got a lot of praise. The film was important because it provided the world with an inside look at the challenges a person can face while trying to make something of themselves, having come from the hood. Lloyd didn't have a large role in the movie. In fact, he was only credited as Knucklehead number 2, but it was a step in the right direction in achieving the career of his dreams. In real life, Lloyd didn't grow up in the hood, but rather in a working-class neighborhood in Beverly Hills. He and his 3 siblings lived a comfortable life and enjoyed special luxuries like their own pool in the backyard. He didn't take any of this for granted and knew that he was very lucky for what he had. In one particular interview, he looked back on his childhood saying, "We were silver spoon kids. We never needed for nothing." Growing up, Lloyd Avery went to Beverly Hills High School and was known as the class clown. While his good looks could have likely allowed him to date any girl he wanted, he preferred to stay single most of the time. Even in high school, he had friends with good connections. In fact, some of the people he went to school with had parents that were celebrities in the music industry. While he was always invited to parties, substance use wasn't his thing, and despite having a little bit of a rebellious streak, he was all in all a pretty good kid. Following high school, Lloyd enrolled in a local trade school, but he didn't stay there for very long. He would go on to work a variety of different low-paying jobs, one of which was as a McDonald's employee. He had no interest in traditional jobs, but instead dreamed of being in the entertainment industry as an actor or producer. But his father, Lloyd Sr., didn't support his dream. He felt that while it was okay if production was a hobby of his son's, he needed to focus on an actual trade so that he would be able to support himself. Lloyd did not allow his father's opinion to dash his hope for his dream career, and luckily through persistence and knowing the right people, he was able to get his big break with Boys in the Hood. Despite the fact that he wasn't one of the most major actors in the film, John Singleton worked with him closely, training him along the way. Lloyd's character was going to be involved in an emotional shooting scene, and it needed to be perfect. Unfortunately, Lloyd did not particularly get along with his co-star, Cuba Gooding Jr., and the pair would often butt heads. Sometimes this would even lead to shouting and cursing matches, and staff members having to jump in to defuse the situation. Luckily, the pair's feud did not impact the overall success of the movie. Despite the fact that Lloyd was still not very well known as an actor, his connection would allow him to score a small role in the 1980s sitcom Doogie Howser, MD. John Singleton was one of Lloyd's biggest supporters and recognized the young man's great potential. In fact, he and Lloyd were so close that John would often come over to his family's home to share meals together. He would later offer not only Lloyd but his brother Trey a role in the film Poetic Justice. The film starred major celebrities like Tupac Shakur and Janet Jackson. While Lloyd may have initially been grateful for the opportunity John gave him with this film, his feelings would later turn sour. After watching the premiere for the film, he jumped up and harshly criticized the film, which of course insulted John. The film did not end up getting good ratings. From then on, Lloyd began to exhibit bizarre and startling behavior that would concern his family and friends. He insulted and lashed out at the people he loved for seemingly no reason at all. It was as if he was becoming the character he had played in Boys in the Hood, but in real life. Before long, he began rapping under the stage name LA Deuce. He wanted to rap about violence in the streets and gang activity, but of course had no experience with any of this. He ended up moving to a dangerous area known as the Jungle, where the infamous gang called the Bloods was known to hang out. Even though he was in his 20s, he was hanging out with gang members who were only in their teens. Many of his friends questioned his behavior. They speculated that because Lloyd was famous enough but not making much money, living in the hood was like his way of proving that he was a real gangster. Lloyd would go on to score some roles in small, lesser-known movies, some of which were focused on hood life. But Lloyd had a hothead attitude, and it was likely attributing to the fact that he was getting less and less roles. He seemed to be making enemies out of people who were supposed to be his friends, and before long, he was creating his own downfall. He was struggling to make ends meet and was even washing cars for extra money. He was also selling illegal substances. On July 1st of 1999, Lloyd would make a mistake that would change the rest of his life. While back again at Santa Barbara Plaza, he came across 2 people who were known to deal illicit substances. One of them was Percy Branch, and the other was Annette Lewis. Lloyd approached them, and after they engaged in an argument, he shot them both. Lloyd was not immediately charged with the involvement of these killings, and even went on to do several more movies. He didn't bother going into hiding and seemed to think he was invincible. However, he would finally have to face the consequences of his actions on December 8th of 1999 when he was arrested. He was found to be guilty in connection with the 2 killings and sentenced to life in prison. This time, he seemed truly determined to change his life and threw himself into his faith, often seen carrying around his Bible. He would highlight passages that spoke to him. Unfortunately, he would only live to the age of 36 and would be found dead in his cell after being beaten to death by his own cellmate. Many of those close to him wonder what his life could have been like if he had chosen a different path.